39, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, of course known everywhere as the mighty OGGO, truly the only committee that matters. Before we start, we have to elect our new Vice Chair. I'm going to turn things over to our clerk very briefly. Go ahead,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So pursuant to the standing orders, the first Vice Chair must be a member of the governing party. I'm now prepared to receive motions for the first Vice Chair. Mr. Gasparo.
Thank you. I nominate John Paul Danko to be the Vice Chair, or the first Vice Chair, excuse me.
So it has been moved by Mr. Gasparo that Mr. Danko be elected as first Vice Chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Non? Alors je vais soumettre cette motion au comité.
No. Well, is it the will of the committee to adopt the motion?
Okay, carried.
Wonderful.
Je déclare donc la motion adoptée et Monsieur John Paul Danko officiellement élu.
Mr. John Paul Danko is officially the Vice Chair of the committee. Congratulations.
Congratulations. We're going to get right to our meeting. We only have the minister till 4:35, so we're going to get right to the opening statement. Colleagues, just a couple things. As we're aware, I normally let our speaking engagements go a bit long if we're in getting a good response, but because we're tight on time, I'm going to cut everyone off, so please watch your own clocks to avoid being cut off. And just very quickly, a point of orders. We're getting into an area of a lot of debate about a point of order, so that we're not tying up our committee time. We just ask everyone, please stick to procedural point of orders, and if you have a debate issue that you disagree with the other side, save your speaking time to address that so we don't tap our committee. We'll go right to Minister Lightbound. Welcome back, sir. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, and speak fast, and we'll try and get you out on time.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thanks for having me again at OGGO. It's a pleasure to be here. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs, membres du comité.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having me today to discuss the budget for SPAC and for Shared Services Canada. We often talk about the programs, we talk about policies, decisions, but behind it all, there's something even more fundamental. It's how the state works. For us, we're talking about paying civil servants, managing real estate, contracts, and also making online services work. That's exactly what we're doing with PSPC and everything else. They're not services like every others. They are key for the government to work for 2026-2027. PSPC has a $5.9 million budget, $5.9 billion budget. We're reducing our budget. These numbers show that we're making choices. It's a difficult context. There are high expectations, costs are going up, and there are real risks. But faced with that, our responsibility is clear and simple. Continue on delivering the goods for Canadians and doing so rigorously. The PSPC's biggest variation is a $1.2 billion decrease linked to infrastructure because many of the large projects under our responsibility are coming to an end. There are also operational costs, and we are cutting red tape. We're streamlining processes and focusing on our essential mission. But there are things we can't slow down. Behind each transaction, there's a civil servant that serves Canadians at our airports, our ports, our military bases all over Canada. PSPC pays an enormous amount of civil servants. That's a huge responsibility, and it's a question of respect for those that make Canada work. They need to be paid on time. These expenses have decreased by $57 million, and we've put money aside to build a new pay system. Our duty is to make sure civil servants are paid and that they're paid on time and that they have a reliable system for that. For Shared Services Canada, it's just as key. As you know, the digital infrastructure of the government, our networks, but also cybersecurity. With a decrease in $128 million, the ministry is continuing to make investments for fundamental infrastructure and to head off cybersecurity threats. Cybersecurity landscape has changed quite a lot and is constantly evolving, and we need to be able to remain capable of meeting that rapidly evolving landscape. We're finding efficiencies where possible. We're protecting what is essential. We're investing where there are higher risks to make sure that we can deal with any eventuality. These systems may be invisible for many Canadians, but a lot of us depend on that infrastructure, and some of them are highly dependent upon that infrastructure, so I won't take up any more of your time. I know there are questions that have been prepared, so thank you so much for your time, and it would be a pleasure to respond to your questions. Or perhaps I'll just also mention that my assistant minister is here from PSPC, and Scott Jones and Scott Davis from Shared Services Canada are also here with me. Thank you, Chair.
Start with Mrs. Block for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome here, Minister and departmental staff. It's good to have you back. I look forward to hearing what it is you have to share with us based on the questions. Minister, you appeared before this committee last year and said your department was preparing for a comprehensive review of all current and planned federal contracts to identify cost reductions. How much have you identified in savings from that exercise?
Oui, merci beaucoup, Madame Bloch. Si on regarde l'examen exhaustif des dépenses qui a eu cours dans tous les
Thank you very
ministères,
much, Mrs. Block. So the exhaustive the CER is being undertaken. That's $142 million over 4 years of savings, and more for the years to come that were ID'd in the context of the CER. We're seeing where we can make efficiencies and centralizing certain functionalities within the department. And it shows the government's desire to spend less and invest more, and also invest in a healthy management of public funds. So the CER, that's $142 million over 4 years of savings.
So spending less, and yet the deficit remains the same or has even grown. Minister, we heard from Canada Post that, and I'm going to quote, given the government's direction, they are moving forward on their transformation plan that they had submitted to you quite a number of months ago. You are the minister responsible for Canada Post. Were you the individual who approved the first phase of Canada Post's plan? And if so, why was your name not associated with the decision? It's my understanding you had put out several press releases, and in fact, I recall many of them, where you outlined that the situation was dire, but we have not heard anything from your office on this.
Oui, il y a plusieurs choses. C'est vrai que
So it's true that Canada Post is under my responsibility. I'm not in charge of day-to-day operations. I help make the broad lines of that policy. So what I said is that going forward, there have been moratoriums for decades that prevents Canada Post from making necessary changes to avoid losses of $6 billion since 2018. And so what I told Canada Post was that first, we're removing the moratorium on closing post offices. You can move to community mailboxes, and that's what...
Minister, because it was reported on the expectations that you outlined for Canada Post last fall. So we're very aware of what you called on them to do, which I recognize they are arm's length. They are an arm's length corporation, and yet you told them what they needed to do in order to become solvent, and you required a strategic plan or a transformational plan that you would then approve so that they could move forward. So while they're arm's length, you've held them somewhat hostage to being able to move forward by first not approving a strategic plan for years, and now PSPC. There were 5 years that a strategic plan was not approved. Now they've been waiting for this. We've been waiting to hear if their transformational plan has been approved, and we have not heard that yet. I'm just going to ask you another question. How many postal workers will be laid off as a result of the transformational plan?
Mais juste, si je peux revenir,
I just need a number.
If I may,
je suis pas responsable.
as I told you, I'm not in charge of day-to-day operations, but I can tell you this. Yes, it's true that I was very involved in Canada Post because, in my opinion, it's unacceptable for a business to lose $10 million a day. And their business model, it's true in Canada, it's true in the US, it's true all over the West, the business model simply does not work anymore. Now, regarding the number of employees, from what I understand,
that it is unacceptable
we
to have
find,
Canada
we find
Post
agreement.
losing that much money. But I would say that some of the blame should be laid at the feet of PSPC and the ministers who have served in that role over the last number of years for not being willing to approve a strategic plan and make some of the hard decisions that needed to be made. So can you tell me how many postal workers will be laid off as a result of the transformational plan?
So just to answer, I'm very proud to be part of a government, a new government that is willing, ready, willing, and able
I just
to
need
make,
a number.
to
I
make
need to
these
know
tough
that you know
decisions
the
on which
number.
I think we agree on the future of Canada Post. As far as the number is concerned, the operations of Canada Post I'm not in charge of on a day-to-day basis. However, my understanding is that as the organization right-sizes itself, most of it will be through attrition.
To provide the number for you, because it's been reported, 30,000 postal workers will be losing their jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Block. Go to Mr. Danko for 6, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good to see you, Minister. A year ago, Canadians elected a serious and pragmatic government, and one of the most important things that we can deliver is trust and confidence in the federal government and ensure that we are strategically using those public tax dollars that are entrusted to us. In your opening statement, you talked about the importance of the civil service, the value and respect of the jobs that they do, the importance of the jobs that they do to Canadians. So through you, Chair, my question is, what steps are you taking to ensure the strategic use of those tax dollars to reduce costs, to improve services, and to ensure that trust and confidence that residents have provided us with?
Merci beaucoup. C'est une excellente question.
thank you very much for your excellent question. The importance of being efficient with public funds cannot be underestimated. We need Canadians to trust the government and their institutions. It's important for Canadians to see results and to know that their money is being well managed. For a year, if we look into what we've done in that respect, there are 2 prongs. First, there's a horizontal part where each department will be called to be more efficient and be more efficient in their own internal processes. In my department, over the last 4 years, we'll save almost $700 million. Shared Services Canada also sought out efficiencies, and that will allow us to save money, and that'll come out in, we will save $60 billion over the next 3 years. And now there's a vertical, or rather I meant to say vertical. There's a will now to look at a vertical way of what can be done. I'm very proud to see that with Shared Services Canada, with PSPC, we're looking into initiatives to save money and using technological tools that all departments can use. For instance, a tool developed here in PSPC called GC Translate. That allows translation with a lot of expertise and very accurately. And much more cheaply the fantastic amount of documents that the federal government is called upon to translate, and that will be able to apply it in a horizontal manner. It's a very considerable saving, and that's what we want. That's the kind of savings that we want to see all over the public service.
I wanted to build maybe on your answer to that question further to the value of the services that the civil servant provide. Having worked in municipal government for a while, seeing the dedication, the commitment that members that work in the public service provide, how are the actions that you and your department are taking, respecting that value that the civil service gives to Canadians?
Je pense que j'en ai fait allusion un peu dans mes
I mentioned this briefly in my opening remarks. One of our priorities, that I'm in charge of in my department, is to ensure that the pay system works well. Everyone in Canada knows what's happened over the last 10, 12 years with Phoenix. We've seen that there's been a reduction of backlogs. And that reduction is continuing to diminish month over month. And just as important, we're transitioning to a new payment system. We're learning from past mistakes, and we're going one step at a time to ensure that everything is working correctly and avoiding what we did with Phoenix, which was everything all at once. So my priority is to reduce the backlog and ensure a smooth transition and ensure that our civil servants are paid on time, and we depend on those civil servants.
Wanted to switch to the use of consultants within the federal government, within the civil service. I worked as a consulting engineer for many years. Oftentimes when we're hiring consultants in the public sector, they're experts in the field. So my question to you is, what level of consultants are working in engineering and architecture versus in management or financial? And when we do hire external consultants, what consideration does your ministry take to determine whether that job can be done in-house or we need to go to hire an external consultant?
Oui, c'est une bonne question qui a fait couler.
Good question. It's featured heavily in the news. There are lots of different categories of external consultants. We must be aware that in my department, PSPC, most external consultants, they're construction and engineering firms that help us with major projects, not just for the parliamentary side, also decontaminating polluted sites. So external management consulting companies are a really teeny tiny portion of that. And in terms of our external contracts for management, we've reduced that number by 36%. And Shared Services Canada has reduced it by 65%. And it represents a really small percentage of consultants. And we really mostly use consultants for architectural or engineering reasons, for instance. I don't know, perhaps if Ariane, you have anything to add?
Past our time, so no, you have nothing to add. We'll go to Madame Gaudreau, please, for 6.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. I'll start with digital providers, service providers. $17 million, rather $3.17 million for American providers. Have you considered Canadian and Quebec IT providers to reduce our dependence on the United States? 100%. 100%. It won't always be possible, but overall, we want to build these infrastructure here in Canada, in Quebec, and we want to encourage Canadian innovation. And I'll take the opportunity to talk about a policy I'm very proud of. Since December, for contracts of over 25 million, the Buy Canadian policy applies for almost all governmental contracts. And this policy has two main criteria. One, you need a Canadian provider. So we give an advantage to Canadian providers, and we look at the real economic activity. But the most important thing is that we're giving points for Canadian content. That can be research, R&D, jobs. So that is key because, yes, sometimes providers that are foreign providers but have a real presence in Canada, well, that's important to take into account. Think of IBM Canada. I visited their facilities in Bromont. They have 1,000 employees. All that to say, what we want is to encourage investment here in Canada and businesses here in Canada, and that's what informs that policy. All right, so I'll ask another question in the same vein. Alto. Is Alto subject to the Buy Canadian policy, yes or no? Alto, yes, where possible, but as it's a consortium, it's a bit different. However, what does that mean? Because people want to know. Yes, so generally, it should apply to Alto because all state businesses are subject to it. The only caveat is that the production capacity must be possible here in Canada, clearly. But the goal behind it is to say where we have the capacity to do it, we want it to be in Canada. Because if we look into all of the components, often we're looking at a system. I'm not a specialist, but I know in Quebec, for instance, all the component parts are, well, this is my fear, that the announcements would be, oh, we bought Canadian because we bought drills at Canadian Tire. But can we have written down, because there are people listening right now, as you know very well, people in, if I talk to Via Rail, for instance, they want to know that those policies are respected and that those policies show. So it's been in place since December 16th. And so since December 16th, that policy has applied, and it's true for the department, and it's also true for Crown corporations. And this is perhaps linked. One of the issues is that we can look into
précédemment, donc avant l'entrée en vigueur de cette politique-là.
Supply in the past. Well, it's having an address in Canada. Now what we want is to not just have an address in Canada. You need to have real economic activity here in Canada. Steel, aluminum. We want aluminum. We want Canadian materials as well. Chair, I would also like details on the percentages. I'd like to know about the criteria as well. That's the subject on everyone's lips, and the major directions. And so what are we to do? What are we going to tell them?
Que le plus ils le seront, le mieux seront leurs chances d'obtenir des contrats.
Well, we're saying the better they are, the better their chances of winning a government contract. Have you established specific targets for economic benefits for Quebec in terms of contracts, local content, and jobs? With the Buy Canadian policy? Well, it depends. I can't invent needs. It's according to the needs of our departments and our clients. For instance, the Coast Guard, the Navy, the different departments of transports, or Crown corporations. Since the policy has come into force, more than $500 million was attributed to contracts subject to the Buy Canadian policy, and around $3.5 billion worth of offers were submitted. 30 seconds. Oh, well, I don't want to cut you off, but if we look all the markets in Canada, that shows the importance of the Buy Canadian policy. All of the levels of government, well, that's about 14% of the GDP, and that's where the Buy Canadian policy is really, really relevant. Well, I'll ask more questions later. Thank you, Chair.
Answer for 5, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And that was a great round of questions from Madame Goudreau. Very well done. And I'm going to pick up on a couple themes that she had, Minister. When it comes to the Buy Canada bit there, I actually had a town and a mayor reach out to me because they received a bill payment for a rental for a Canada Post space from Utah, from a company operating out of Utah. And I'm just wondering, is that standard procedure that you would send bill payments from a contractor out of the United States to pay for a Crown Corporation's rental space?
Juste pour être sûr de comprendre,
I just want to make sure I understand. Are you talking about Canada Post that sent that receipt?
The payment for the rental space by Canada Post to the town was paid for by a third-party provider out of Utah to pay for the rental space for the Crown Corporation from the town of Leader. Is that standard practice?
Je peux pas vous parler. Je pense que ce serait une question à...
I can't speak to that. I think that question would be better asked to Canada Post. The policy Buy Canadian, for the time being, applies to contracts over $25 million, so I can't be more specific. But over the spring, it'll apply to contracts of $5 million and more. So it'll increase the scope of the policy. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been in place since December 16th. So for this specific case, I would invite you to ask a question to Canada Post, and hopefully they can answer you.
Hanging fruit like that might be a simple way to, bring more things within our own border, but particularly the optics of having a Crown Corporation sending payment through a third provider from Utah is probably not a good look for the government when you're trying to go down this Buy Canada pathway. I'm going to switch to another point here. Canada Post has basically told this committee and has told Canadians that they will not participate in the gun buyback confiscation program that your government is going through. Now, the government is going ahead with this program despite objections from groups like Canada Post. Now, the government has hinted at using Canada Post as a means to collect firearms from people, but Canada Post has said no. Are you going to respect Canada Post's decision, or are you going to force Canada Post to go ahead with this program?
Moi, par rapport à ça, il y a des décisions qui ont...
Decisions were made regarding the gun buyback, and I don't think that Canada Post is involved.
Okay, well, I guess we'll watch and see what happens with that. The spring update wants to bring back search and seizure for small mail. It was included in Bill C2. It was that bill obviously did not proceed. Bill C12 came in its place, but the search and seizure of mail was dropped. But the spring update brings it back. Are you going to see that happens, or are you going to take the cue from Canadians who'd said no to that measure and asked it to be removed? What's the plan here?
Oui, eu égard au petit paquet de...
Regarding small mail, so letters, first, it fulfills requests from the police because we know there can be a small quantity of drugs that have considerable lethal effects. So it's to respond to their inability to selectively open mail that might contain those substances, for instance, with fentanyl. So it's mostly based on what we heard on the ground. In my opinion, it's in order to protect Canadians.
There's a process to get a warrant to be able to access that mail, and that process already currently exists. So what is going to be the threshold then, Minister, for reasonable suspicion to open Canadians' mail?
Mais pour nous, comme je le mentionnais tout à l'heure, c'est que...
As I said earlier, for the time being, the police officer has to wait to go to someone's house if they have a reasonable doubt. We want police to have the authority in order to safely verify mail And this is a file that was brought up by police many times.
Justifies having Canada Post open people's mail, right? Like the police can get a warrant and they could do so, but again, Canadians want to know if you're going to proceed with this, what's the threshold for that letter to be opened prior to it arriving at somebody's house?
Oui, comme je le mentionnais, c'est d'avoir la possibilité de le faire.
As I mentioned, it's having the possibility to do so. What's not planned which is not possible at the time being, and police have asked because not opening the mail represents a danger.
For 5.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci, Monsieur le
Thank you,
Ministre.
Chair, and thank you, Minister. My questions are regarding AI. AI clearly has major transformational potential and, as we all know, major risks.
Me to understand, what is our framework for thinking about appropriate application of artificial intelligence as we try to modernize the public service and save money in ways that are responsible for Canadian taxpayers?
Ouais, ben c'est d'abord content de vous retrouver ici.
Well, first, it's a pleasure to see you here again. Thank you for the question. I think that is a key question. I think it is fundamental for the government to carefully adopt AI in our processes. On the one hand, internal processes from the back office that require us to integrate AI, and also what Canadians see in services that they get from the government. And it's important to do so in a visible way. How data is processed, how transactions are made, what the AI is basing itself on. Are we using it as an assistant for civil servants? How are we using AI? Where is the AI data? And where's the machinery behind it all? We need absolute control on those processes. I'm working on that with the TBS on implementing AI, and there's already a policy from the Treasury Board that provides some guidelines. From an operational point of view, as Shared Services Canada, how do we arrive in departments that have their own ways of doing things? How can we break down those silos and find common solutions for the whole government? At my left, there's someone who's really looked into the issue, the president of Shared Services Canada. Scott, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you.
Is that there is a policy on the responsible and effective use of AI, but also a number of ways that we make sure that it's free of bias, that it's being used effectively. You can reproduce the decisions that are made and understand why it's making these decisions. And so all of that together gives a framework for this. There's also the transparency that comes with the AI registry, where we're using AI, how we're applying it. And then also running it on sovereign Canadian infrastructure so that when it's making inference, it's done on Canadian, in Canadian data centers, on Canadian infrastructure, using Canadian technology so we know how it's being done. And then the expertise that comes with understanding that, making sure that that's in-house by public servants to know how this is running and working with Canadian companies.
Thank you. Because that was my next question, actually related to data protection, because I think we all would agree that it's critically important as we learn from and experiment with these technologies that we ensure that our data is kept here and that Canadians can have faith that will be the case. So thank you for that reassurance. I think we all know that there will also be an asymmetric impact on the workers of the Canadian Public Service as we implement these new technologies. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about, there are some, as you say, back office and other kinds of functions. There may be higher level functions not too long from now that may be taken up by, perhaps none of us will have a job. But anyway, when that day comes, thinking about how to protect, retrain, offer other opportunities as those asymmetric impacts make their way through the public service. Is that something that we're thinking about?
Définitivement, puis juste à ce chapitre.
100%. And to speak to that, I can see the potential of the use of AI in the civil service. I see it as a way to improve the quality work done by our civil servants. And I think many want to have the right tools in order to avoid doing repetitive tasks that AI could take over. And last week, I met the Minister Glubich in the Department of Information Technology. They created an AI academy for their civil servants so that they can learn how to use AI tools efficiently, and it's highly in demand, and I think that kind of initiative will be very useful going forward.
Thanks very much. Madame Gaudreau for 2.5.
Vite. Je veux juste être sûre.
I just want to make sure that this is clear and that I've understood correctly. When I talked about ASTOM, which is in 2 areas of Quebec, Quebec and Ontario, the goal is to bring talent out. We have talent, we have expertise. Will Alto be obliged to comply with the Buy Canadian policy? Because there's no factory in Canada. The equipment ordered by Mr. Bernaud were built in California. Via Rail wants to redo their trains outside of the Quebec-Windsor corridor. Can we be sure that the workers, be they from La Pocatière or Thunder Bay, can we ensure that the workers will be the ones to create those trains? Regarding Alto, I think it's a bit premature for multiple reasons. First, Alto is still really in the starting steps, and it's not technically under my department. However, if we want to take a concrete example, the idea behind Buy Canadian, the Buy Canadian policy, I was really happy in January to be in La Pocatière to announce the contract for buying the Toronto Metro cars, and those cars will be, or rather, those buses will be built in La Pocatière. And part of them will be built in Ontario as well. In my opinion, that kind of contract that was awarded is Buy Canadian in action. That's a kind of solidarity that we need to have. For you, it's just Quebec. For me, it's beyond Quebec, but throughout the country, while we're dealing with unfair, illegal tariffs from the Canadians, having this economic solidarity is key. And it was just wonderful to see the Vancouver SkyTrain in La Pocatière, to see the enthusiasm for the Toronto Metro. And in my opinion, that's a wonderful example of this policy. So transparency is planned, from what I understand, and I imagine, Mr. Chair, that we will have the opportunity to have the detailed breakdown, because our job is everything about the economic impact of government in Quebec and elsewhere. So are you committed to providing those details? It is my greatest pleasure to do so, but if you're talking about...
It's out on time. Mrs. Jansen for 5, please.
Yes, thank you. Just this week, we heard that your department has referred another individual to police, making it the 10th case of suspected procurement fraud referred to for criminal investigation. And I know at our meeting in December, I asked whether you could commit to including fraud data in your department result report. And I was quite surprised by your written response, which said that fraud detection data isn't included because it fluctuates and doesn't reflect performance. I just want to make clear, detecting and preventing fraud is a core part of the job, correct?
Absolument. Puis
Okay.
d'ailleurs, à ce chapitre-là, je
Yes, absolutely. And at the time being, ensuring compliance of suppliers, well, we want to make sure that there's no illegal behavior on the part of our suppliers.
If fraud goes up and down significantly, and you have all these new ways of catching these fraudsters, logically that would mean that fraud's something important to track and report regularly. Would you agree? It's a yes or no.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so help me understand why aren't we reporting this in that report? Why, if fraud is serious, we have a tip line, investigations, recover millions, and we refer cases to police. Why aren't we putting it in your performance report?
Je vais laisser ma sous-ministre prendre une partie de la réponse.
I'll allow my colleague to take part of this response. When we consider the actions of the department, especially this one that we're discussing, in some instances of fraud, suspected fraud, we take fraudulent behavior very seriously. It's really important to ensure the integrity of our system, and I'll allow my colleague to continue.
Is the latest referral related to the same pattern of subcontractor overbilling, or is it a different type of alleged fraud?
Solé, Madame Reza pour plus de détails.
It is overbilling fraud. It's been referred to the RCMP.
Okay, and when was PSPC first made aware of this case? When was it referred to the RCMP?
It was referred, I think, on April 16th of 2026, and we weren't made aware of it. We're constantly looking for the fraud detection that you advised. We found it. We cross-referenced it. We found criminal intent, and we immediately...
Do you know how much the value is?
Unfortunately, I don't have the value.
And how many more cases are currently under review that could result in RCMP referrals?
I'll have to come back with that number. There's always cases in flight that get acquitted or sent on, so I don't have a steady state number right now.
And can a supplier under active investigation, for procurement fraud still receive federal contracts?
It's compartmentalized so that we try to manage those that are focused and
Okay,
in
so
flight
really quickly,
versus-
why is this not included in the report? The performance report? Why? I don't understand.
I think it's because there are so many new dashboards and fraud reporting obligations across government that we're looking at the best way to provide the information. So there is some public accounting format.
Is my time up? Oh, okay. Perhaps you can explain to me, if we have all these different dashboards, we're trying to figure out how to ensure that we know your actual, and I'm going to ask Mr. Lightbound, we're trying to figure out how to understand what kind of fraud is happening, and yet somehow or another it's not in your performance. Like, this is the core job that you have, it's part of your performance, and yet it's not given to parliamentarians as a performance report. That makes no sense to me. It doesn't matter how many dashboards you have. The report for Parliament should tell us what.
À ma connaissance, les cas qui ont été rapportés et qui ont été soumis aux autorités sont...
These were submitted to public authorities, and now we can improve in the way that we make that information accessible to parliamentarians, and I'll look into that. Or I'm interested in looking into that.
No, I realize there's an annual report. I'm asking, why isn't this in your department report? Because it's clearly performance. Like, if there's a huge fluctuation in finding these things, to me that's a performance issue. And that's what we're here to understand.
Si vous me permettez, it's not necessarily a fluctuation in finding things. It's where there is fraud, we find it. So sometimes there'll be periods where there is no fraud found. Sometimes there'll be a stronger period of overbilling, and we are constantly looking at the control functions we're putting in.
And yet your wording was about fluctuation as to why we're not getting that in your department performance report.
Bon, comme à la base de Madame Jensen, l'information...
The information is public. There is a report. If we can make it more accessible for parliamentarians, as you said, it would be my pleasure.
Last week, or in December, when we asked, it was basically the answer we received was, "Oh, it's because it fluctuates." I don't understand that answer. That's a silly answer.
That is our time, but I know we have PSPC back on Thursday. Perhaps we can pursue it then. Mr. Gasparo, we'll finish with you, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. I'd like to go back and pick up from where my colleague left off in regards to management consultants. If I understand correctly, only about 1.9% of all federal contract spending last year was on management consulting. Is that correct?
Oui, c'est juste.
So to put that in context, then obviously roughly 98.1% of federal contract spending went to other purposes, right? It would just be basic
Oui,
math.
tout à fait.
Perfect. Just
That's it.
for those at home that need a calculator, just wanted to make sure. So that would include building and maintenance infrastructure, delivering IT systems, cleaning up contaminated sites, providing health services in remote and northern communities, and other operational necessities, correct?
Vous rendez mon travail facile.
Great.
Monsieur
Perfect.
Gasparo.
You're making my work so easy, Mr. Gasparo.
So it would be fair to say then that the vast majority of federal contracting is not about management consulting, but actually about delivering tangible programs and services to Canadians. Is that correct?
Encore une fois, correct.
That's right.
Are there policies or controls in place to assess whether work should be done in-house versus contracted out before a consulting contract is approved?
Oui, absolument.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a reflex that's been developed over the last few years. And it shows when we look at that percentage, that small percentage, 1.8% of federal contracts. But when we look at the reduction year over year, 86% reduction in Shared Services Canada. And when we look throughout all departments, the reflex now should be to say, can we do it in-house? And sometimes it can be useful to work with external experts, but the reflex is really to do it in-house.
Great. How much time do I have, Chair?
2.5 minutes.
Great. I do just want to clarify one thing my colleague, Mr. Patzer, said earlier. The way the law is currently worded, police are unable to issue a warrant for small parcels being delivered. The Canada Post Act does not allow even for the police to get a warrant to open up someone's mail. So I just wanted to correct that for the record. We are changing it, but as of now, not even a police warrant can intercept mail. So as the Parliamentary Secretary for Combating Crime, I just thought it was my obligation. Correct, yeah.
And that's a fair point. That goes to the reason why police would have to wait until mail is delivered until they can, act on a warrant, and that's the issue.
Correct. So it puts police officers at risk and puts others at risk. I just wanted to just say that. So just, sorry, I don't know how much time. Okay, great.
You're making my life even easier now, answering answering questions than I had in the past. So.
Yeah. Okay. So just to come back, just to finish off on the management consulting and the contracts. Overall, would you agree that the objective is not to eliminate consultants overall, but rather to perform essential services that we do not have in-house expertise with?
Oui, écoutez, there are where we will always need outside expertise when we think of engineering, architecture, construction, where for large infrastructure projects, for instance, or decontamination of certain sites, we'll need outside expertise, that's for sure. However, when it comes to management consultants, we've done a great deal to reduce the use of outside consultants for management consultants, and the objective is to build the in-house capacity. But where needed, in some instances, it can, but the objective is to reduce it by which the results speak for themselves when you look at what PSPC and shared services have achieved.
Thank you, Chair.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We actually got caught up there. Minister and officials, thanks for being with us. We are going to excuse you. Can we do a quick 2-minute turnaround so we can bring in Treasury Board Minister, Treasury Board President Ali, and get started for the final hour? We're suspended. President of the Treasury Board. We'll allow opening statement for you for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Merci, Mr. Le Président. I'm pleased to be with
Thank you, Chair.
to discuss the 2026-27 main estimates. The main estimates outline $502.8 billion in planned spending, including $230.4 billion in proposed voting spending. They include $14.7 billion of initiatives announced in Budget 2025. Mr. Chair, tabling budgets in the fall allows for more spending to be reflected in the main estimates and the departmental plans. This helps align the two documents more closely with the budget. The main estimates include reductions as part from the comprehensive expenditure review. And importantly, Mr. Chair, they show how the government is investing in key priorities to keep our country strong and prosperous. Mr. Chair, most of the proposed spending in the 2026-27 main estimates would go towards transfer payments. These transfer payments are vital because they help build a stronger and more resilient Canada. They support important priorities such as benefits for seniors, the Canada Health Transfer, and infrastructure projects. They support national and provincial and territorial programs and provide funding for local communities, Indigenous groups, nonprofit, and research institutions. And that's why the government is seeking $300.5 billion in transfer payments, nearly 60% of the total of these estimates. The main estimates also support activities and investments across federal government. $148.6 billion, which is less than 30% of the proposed spending, would be directed to operating the capital expenses. About a third of this amount is focused on securing Canada's sovereignty by rebuilding, rearming, and reinvesting in the Canadian Armed Forces. These main estimates include over $48 billion in voted spending to support the Department of National Defense. These investments would support modern equipment, training, and cooperation with international partners, helping keep Canadians safe and contributing to global stability. Now that Canada has met 2% NATO's defense spending target, our work does not stop here. We will continue investing in the Canadian Armed Forces to ensure we remain strong, secure, and prepared for the future as we build Canada strong. Lastly, Mr. Chair, my department, Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, is seeking $11.8 billion in these main estimates. This will help us meet essential obligations, covering public service insurance, addressing rising costs in public service health care plan, supporting disability insurance programs, and accounting for increased payroll taxes. Mr. Chair, as I mentioned earlier, these estimates also include reductions from comprehensive expenditure review. This exercise identified savings by eliminating underperforming, duplicative, or outdated activities, allowing resources to be redirected to higher priorities that strengthen the country. For TBS, the department is reducing its 2026-27 operating budget by $28.9 million, and annual saving will reach $57.8 million by 2028-29. Mr. Chair, these estimates show that the government is investing what matters most to Canadians. And now my officials and I would be happy to take your question. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Mrs. Cusi for 6 minutes. Welcome back to OGGO, Mrs. Cusi.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's always a pleasure to be here. I genuinely miss this committee, I have to say, after spending close to 3 years on it prior to the election. So it is great to be here. And President, it is great to see you. Thank you so much for coming here today. I'm so sorry we haven't had time to meet for coffee as of yet. I hope your schedule allows for it sometime soon. Minister, you're here today to defend your government's 2026-2027 main estimates, which detail over $502 billion in spending. That's $15 billion higher than your 2025-2026 main estimates, and a stark contrast to the promise of savings that you, the Minister of Finance, and the Prime Minister pledged to Canadians. Your press release for the main estimates begins with these words: prudent fiscal management combines the efficient use of public funds with investments to support Canadians and drive economic growth. I want to focus on the phrase efficient use of public funds specifically. You sit in a Liberal cabinet, which in 11 years since forming government has not once presented a surplus budget, and are a member of a Liberal government which, since 2015, has doubled the entire spend of the federal government, putting the Canadian taxpayers of not only today, but also tomorrow, my children and your children, on the hook for your reckless spending. Reckless spending, which includes a minimum of $60 million on the ArriveCAN application, $300+ million on the Prescribe IT program, $6.6 billion on a benefits delivery program, which has left tens of thousands of seniors without access to crucial benefits like OAS, just to name a few. And reckless spending, which has seen the total cost of professional and special services across the government to rise to an incredible $26.6 billion in the main estimates alone. I want to talk specifically about your comprehensive expenditure review. I've questioned you before on this plan and have noted how actions speak louder than words. This is still true today. Since announcing the CER, the government has tabled the 2025 budget, which saw $90 billion in net new spending announced. You've tabled the supplementary estimates, C, for 2025-2026, which asked for an additional $5.4 billion in spending last year, and you've tabled these main estimates, which asked for $502 and $2 billion in approvals. None of this spending, President, is less, and none of this has shown any progress in the CER. In these main estimates specifically, you presented a plan which sees 64 departments and agencies requesting more money in 2026 than last year. This includes your own department, which has $11 billion in more spending this year over last. Not only is the total spending on departments higher, the actual cost of bureaucracy or personnel is up as well in the main estimates, with personnel spending up $3 billion and 62 federal organizations boosting their personnel spending from last year. This is coming despite your promise to rein in the size of the federal public service, which your government has nearly doubled in the past decade. Then comes the spring economic update. As Shadow Minister for the Treasury Board, I was holding out high hopes that this update would finally outline progress made with the CER or showcase how the government is taking its responsibility seriously to be the efficient steward of public funds, as you and your superiors have promised. However, this wasn't the case. The spring update doubled the deficit that Justin Trudeau had expected for 2026-2027 and added another $37 billion in net new spending to our debt. In fact, the words comprehensive expenditure review appeared just 4 times in the 167-page document, with one of these mentions being tied to consultant spending, something that even the Liberal-appointed parliamentary budget officer raised flags with yesterday in her reports on the spring economic update. Nothing that, despite previous government initiatives to cap or reduce spending on consultants. The public accounts indicate that this spending item has increased consistently in recent years. Canadians expect prudent fiscal management of their tax dollars. However, your government is not delivering on that, President. With the spring update, we learned that as a result of the past decade of Liberal spending, the cost to service the national debt will now be $59 billion, representing a cost of $3,400 for every Canadian family.
Sorry, there's a point of order to respond. Mr. Duncan, what's your point of order?
The point here is to ask the minister questions. So
Okay,
is
that's
there
not a point of order.
Is there a question coming up?
Okay, Mr. Danko, I asked at the very beginning that we hold our point of orders for actual procedural issues. I asked you respect that. Please continue. We have 50 seconds.
Thank you very much, President. I would also be very worried and concerned as a member of the government if this was my government that was being held to this account. So I certainly understand the attempt to stop the information that I'm presenting, not only to the committee and to the President, which I know he's well aware of since he stays on top of his file, but also to Canadians. Minister, you and your government, in closing, have noted that the implementation of the CER is well underway. However, as I've outlined, you've brought forward billions in new spending to Parliament and have just tabled the economic update, which does not provide any details on actual savings in 2026 and 2027 by departments and agencies. When I last asked you questions, you said I was confused about your savings plan. Minister, I'm not confused about your plan because the plan does not clearly exist. Can you be honest with Canadians today and share your plan, please?
I apologize, Minister, but we are past the time, but perhaps you can answer that if Mr. Gasparo's around. You're up, Mr. Gasparo.
Thank you for being here, Mr. President. So you noted in your remarks that total planned spending of $502.8 billion. And just could you highlight some of the main factors driving the increases compared to last year's estimates, please?
Merci beaucoup. Thank you for your question, and thank you for your work. I was not given the chance of respond to the previous question from my colleague. Yes, there was a lot into it, but to your question to main estimates, I think this, just to remind everyone that this study is about main estimates 2026-27, which is, as I said, mentioned $502.8 billion in spending and up to $15.9 billion from last year. Chair, $230.4 billion in voted spending and $272.4 billion in statutory spending. 60%, approximately $300.5 billion, is for transfer payments to, for example, Health Canada transfer, early benefits, and fiscal equalization. $14.7 billion in new budget 2025 spending, mainly to defense and infrastructure. $11.8 billion for Treasury Board, mainly Treasury Board Secretariat, mainly for the government-wide costs, for example, public service insurance and benefits. That increases include Vote 20, public service insurance increased by $1.03 billion, and Vote 50, defense and security initiatives increased by $1 billion. So those are the main estimates, major figures are included into that.
Thank you for that. How is the government approaching cost management while ensuring that Canadians continue to receive the high-quality service they rely on?
Thank you for the question. We were elected with the mandate to spend less, invest more, and balance our operational budget in next 3 years, and to build the strongest economy in the G7. And that's exactly, we are laser focused on that. And part of my mandate given to me by Prime Minister, that to launch a comprehensive expenditure review, that how we can balance our operational budget and also find savings from performing programs and reinvest into core priorities. And that's exactly we did. And then in that review, we will achieve savings of $9 billion in 2026-27, $10 billion in 2027-28, and $13 billion in 2028-29 and ongoing. And you know, it's those savings are coming from duplicative, underperforming programs, and finding those savings and investing in defense, infrastructure, housing. those are the priorities, core priorities of our mandate of new government.
I'm glad you mentioned the comprehensive expenditure review. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the impact that's having on our deficit and the broader purpose and value it brings to improving government operations.
We're focused on finding efficiencies and investing in core priorities and delivering results for Canadians. We're investing in this. The main estimate 2026-27 proposes over $48 billion for defense to support modern equipment, training, and cooperation with international partners. The estimate also contains Central Vote 50, which is $1 billion to provide flexibility for unforeseen national defense or security needs. All allocation will be reported in the next estimates. So these are the measures we have been taking and delivering results for Canadians.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Madam, go to a place for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I'd like to talk about the return to office policy. The media has reported quite a lot on the lack of space. As you know, obviously, the government is requiring a return to office for civil servants. Reports show that there's a lack of space in federal offices. What explains that contradiction between a return to office mandate and the concrete ability to have offices for those workers?
Merci beaucoup for your very important question. First of all, I would like to thank the All Public Service for their contribution in delivering services to Canadians. That the policy is in place to have 4 days for public servants to be in person and 5 days for executives to be in person. Obviously, we're working with our my counterpart, like Minister Joel from PSPC, to make those arrangements for the spaces, and we are mindful of the health and safety of our public servants. And
Chair, was there a comprehensive evaluation beforehand of all real estate and office capacities before imposing the return to work mandate?
I think it's there is a consideration that the policy is in place, and PSPC, that's their job to provide office spaces, and they are working on that.
Because whether or not you want them in person, if there's no space, well, what can you do? And now we're going into attrition, early retirement. And if we're asking civil servants to return to office, we're going to have to innovate buildings. What can we do to adapt infrastructure for that? I'm really, really worried. Because on the one hand, we're talking about budget cuts in the civil service, and then on the other hand, we're going to spend money to renovate offices. I just don't understand, and the people in my riding don't understand either. It doesn't make sense to them.
The question, that's a really important question. Look, before COVID, we had in-person office spaces, and public service was working from offices. The things changed in COVID, and now I think as new government has ambitious agenda, and we need to deliver services to Canadian, and it's important to have healthy and safe environment for our public servants to deliver to collaborate and to have a team building and deliver services to Canadians. And we're working with our counterparts, like it's union leaders and also PSPC to make those arrangements. And I'll ask my deputy to shed some light if you allow 30 seconds. So he would give
Mais juste avant, c'est parce qu'on a eu des études.
But just before, there were studies, including in the private sector, hybrid, and as an MP myself, I have employees. We don't have the same relationship anymore because we use technology more, and that's why I want to know more, because there have been a lot of studies that employees are more productive in person.
Monsieur le Président, merci.
Quickly, Chair, just to add on to my colleagues' words, we would like to establish and create a workforce that is highly performing given the government's priorities. We're going to do that, and we will do it with people in the office 5 days a week for management to create better workspaces. It's better if people have their own workspace. Teams prefer to work together with an office and not a shared office.
We can to assign seating so teams can be together. Workforces are more productive that way. We have done some consultation. There is going to be some spaces across the public service where there is not enough space to do that initially, and it will evolve. But the objective is 5 days a week for executives starting this week. That is no problem. 4 days, the intention is starting in July for non-executives. And to the extent we can get to more assigned seating, we will do that, but that will take some time, and it will vary by minister or by department because there was growth across the public service that was not supported with real property additions.
Il reste 10 secondes, Monsieur le Président.
I don't have much time left, and I'm trying to think of client services when we think of the pay services, when we transition to deep force, if that's what it's called. I'm having a hard time understanding the coherence of your words. Thank you.
That's our time. Mrs. Block, please, for 5.
Oh, I think it was Mr. Patser.
Thank you very much. Minister, can you just really briefly inform this committee, when did you become the minister?
Last year.
Last year? Okay. Are you aware of the Treasury Board policy on communications and federal identity?
I could, do you have any specific question on that?
Well, just are you broadly, just broadly speaking, are you aware of it?
I'm, like, there's so many policies there, so this is, okay, like
okay.
to know what is your specific question on that?
For sure. I'll get into it. So, I mean, the policy effective date took effect March 27th of 2025. It was an update to a policy from 2016, so within Liberal governments here. The policy is on communications and federal identity. I'm going to go down to section 3.1, and I'm going to quote, Government of Canada communications are nonpartisan, effectively managed, well-coordinated, clear and responsive to the diverse information needs of the public and Government of Canada employees. Now, it goes on to say that the definition of nonpartisan is objective, factual, and explanatory, free from political party slogans, images and identifiers, bias, designation, or affiliation. The primary color associated with the governing party is not used in a dominant way unless an item is commonly depicted in that color. And I'm just going to start here, Mr. Minister, with the budget 2025. Canada Strong. I put a little Saskatchewan touch on it there so people knew which book was mine. Your fall, or sorry, it's not the fall update, it's the spring economic update. Canada Strong. Today, from the Liberal Party webpage, Canada Strong. Also from Convention, Canada Strong. Also,
Point of order, Chair.
Liberal Party fundraising.
Sorry, I'm just going to stop the clock. Your point of order?
I don't believe we're permitted to use props.
Yes, you
as
are.
part of our committee.
Yeah, it's
not the
actually
House of Commons.
Yeah, there are
Mr.
different
Danko.
rules for committee. So continue, Mr. Patser.
Thank you very much. The rules matter, and this is what I'm getting to. The Liberal Party website, Canada Strong, soliciting donations. So, Liberal Party website, soliciting donations. It was the theme of your convention. It's also the theme of your update. It is also the theme of your budget. Okay? The Treasury Board, you're the minister, sets out the policy, and the policy is clear. Government of Canada Communications, this document, because right here in the very bottom corner, Government of Canada. Okay? Just pretty clear. Partisan branding, Government of Canada branding. Radio ads, Canada Strong. Television ads, Canada Strong. It's quite clear. So, since you're the department that sets the policy, are you following up to make sure that the rules that are set by the Treasury Board are actually being followed by the Government of Canada?
Thank you for the question. I know the rules and I saw that. It's just I just wanted to get back how the people, the Canadian elected this government with that mandate to build Canada strong. So to build the strongest economy in the G7, to create jobs, to help in affordability, to provide dental care plan support. So do you think anything from that comes into a policy that becomes partisan? So I think there's the rules in place and the rules are being followed. In your interpretation, you are making this up, misleading Canadians.
Making this
partisan.
up. Okay.
This committee is
Minister, I'm going to stop you right there.
I'm here
It's
to
my time.
talk about main estimate 2026-27.
Yes,
So let's
me too.
not waste our resources and focus on the core matter.
Okay, Minister,
So
it's
the
my time. I
policy
gave you lots of time to respond.
Okay.
Please, thank you. This is the spring economic update.
Yep.
It says Canada Strong on it. Today, on the Liberal Party website, Canada Strong, $10, $25, $100, $250, $500, other. Donate. Liberal Party of Canada, Canada Strong. It's right here, okay? The website, your website, through the Treasury Board, is abundantly clear about what defines partisan messaging, and it says that the Government of Canada is supposed to be free of partisan messaging. So why is it not free of partisan messaging?
I can say that the messaging is free of partisan and rules are being followed. And you have misconception. You have illusion. You're trying to make partisan claims. But I can assure that the rules are being followed.
We'll now go to Ms. Rochefort, please, for 5.
Oui, Minister Ali, thank you for your work. And I was impressed when you noted that the savings are for, I guess, 26-27 are of $9 billion. And the next year will be $10 billion. And then after that, $13 billion. And so some impressive results and some results of good work. So thank you for that. But certainly, I'd like to maybe understand from the budget identifies savings of $9 billion, as you pointed out, for 26-27, while the main estimates, they show an increase in spending. So can you help us understand, clarify how these two figures align?
So that's in budget 2025. Then the savings of $9 billion in 2026-27, while the main estimate shows an increase in spending this year. The increase in the main estimate reflects new investment from budget 2025 to support Canadians and grow the economy. This includes affordability measures like Canada Groceries and Essentials Benefit, which will support over 12 million Canadians. We're also making it easier to buy a home by reducing development charges and providing targeted GST relief for home buyers. Canadians are also seeing relief at the pump with a temporary pause on the fuel excise tax until Labor Day. At the same time, the $9 billion in saving will be phased in over the next 2 years, ensuring we invest now while maintaining fiscal discipline.
Thank you for that response. And I was wondering maybe if you might help us clarify. There was I'm not sure when it was, there was a witness at some point. We discussed pay for performance versus bonuses. And so I'm wondering if we might come back on that. And I'm not sure if, Mr. Matthews, it was you when we had that discussion. And if you, I just felt that we finished the discussion and there was a lack of clarity. So would you be able to bring some clarity to that today?
Yes, it's a really important question. Executive have public service. There's a part of their salary. There's two components. There is incentives and there is a bonus. Those incentive performance pay is part of their salary. So there are criteria. If they meet those criteria, achieve those goals and objectives in their performance, then they qualify to get their performance pay. So that is a part of their package. And the bonus part is very small portion. It's about, demonstrate about 7% who received last time. But 11%, the at-risk pay is a portion of executives. I'm just giving you right wordings. That at-risk pay is a portion of executives' compensation, on average about 11% that must be earned annually by meeting some expectations outlined in their performance agreement. So this is not something, it's above, on top of their salary. That is part of their agreement in their job agreement. If they meet those targets, then they receive the performance pay and bonus if you're exceptionally performing. And this is happening in private sector as well. So if you want to have a talent, if you want to provide world-class services, then you need to attract these government service. And I just like to thank them for delivering services to Canadians with their commitment and their dedication.
For retention as well, certainly. I'm always impressed when we talk about consultants and the reductions that we have been making on that front. And could you share with us how you're going to be following that, and how tracking it, and how it will be achieved? The continued reductions in consultant services.
Merci. Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's will be overall management consultant is a reduction we had in last year from 900 million to 450 million. From 837.8 million to 449.8 million. So it was a reduction of 46% in 2024.
Impressive.
In 2025.
Mm-hmm. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madame Gaudreau.
Tantôt, votre collègue.
Earlier, your colleague explained, and I'll say finally, he said, finally, an efficient system is coming called Deep Force for 430,000 civil servants. Every day, someone knocks on my door to tell me about their pay issues. There needs to be a minimum of confidence in the pay system, and not just finally. That means it was really inefficient before, and many people prayed for change for too long. But we also talked about reducing the backlogs. We don't want any more errors. We don't want any more tickets. What are your commitments before starting your step-by-step transition to Dayforce?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
That's a really important question, although this is a PSPC question, but we're, as an employer of public service, I hear it, and I'm committed to provide proper oversight and also implement policies and to make sure that these services are provided in timely manner and as effective as we can. And I think it's a backlog has come down, but there is still there. But I'm going to ask Deputy to highlight that current status of that. Please.
Certainly. So backlog has come down, still there, as the Minister said. Donc, le plan qui le ministère.
The PSPC plan will be the key to eliminate the backlog for the 3 departments that have adopted the new pay system. First, that serve Shared Services Canada, PSPC, the 2 departments under Mr. Lightbound, and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. So those are 3 departments that will adopt the new software, and we will learn. We'll learn from their experiences, and I believe that we'll adopt the new.
No,
Oui, please excuse.
So you said we're going to adopt it last year, but you mean next year, yes.
PSPC has focused on eliminating the backlog for those 3 first, because with that backlog, without that backlog eliminated, adoption is not going to be as easy as it should be. So that's the focus.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Mrs. Block.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome here, Minister Ali, as well to your departmental officials. I just want to circle back to the intervention that my colleague made. And Minister, as the President of the Treasury Board, who oversees the policies that guide the nonpartisan advertising that is to take place with the Government of Canada, I'm wondering if you would be able to table with this committee the advice that you would have received either from your deputy minister or anybody else within your office, that the rules of the Treasury Board when it comes to nonpartisan advertising were being followed, especially after this concern was raised with the Privy Council office last week. Can you table with us any advice that was given to you around these nonpartisan advertising rules?
I think the policy is clear there, and we sent to Chair.
Minister, I'm not asking you to talk about the rules. I'm asking you to table with this committee the advice you received, because you indicated that you had been advised that the rules were being followed, that the slogan I'm sorry, just a minute, please. Let me finish.
Like to correct you.
No, let me finish, please. This is my time, and I'm not even done asking the question.
Okay.
You had indicated that the rules were that you had been advised the rules were followed, that there was no partisan advertising happening with the Government of Canada. Spring economic update. I'm just asking you to table with us
Chair,
the advice that you were given.
Please? Because she said, I said it in my intervention that I was advised. I didn't say that. I said the rules are clear, rules are being followed, just to set the record straight. Because I don't know where you
we can go back to the
where
Hansard.
you took this.
We can go
that
back
I was
to the Hansard.
I took advice. I don't know where you take it.
I
think
we can go back to the
what
Hansard
I
and
said
check
is
that
to
out.
my colleague.
I think you said you were told that they.
No, I didn't say I was told. I said rules are being followed. You can check the recording.
Okay.
What I said.
We will.
That there's a rule. There are rules, and those are being followed. This is not partisan. Now you're inserting that I took an advice and you want me to present that. So that's what I'm trying to correct it.
Well, we will go back and take a look at the Hansard. In fact, we can look it up right now and have that answer for you before you leave at 5:30. Okay. I'll move on. Minister Ali, in your government spring economic update, the real GDP forecasts from the Bank of Canada are lower than what your government predicts in 2027. Why is the government's fiscal planning assumption more optimistic than the Bank of Canada's assessment, and what is this based on? And then my second question would be, what happens if your projections are wrong?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. New government came with this mandate, was elected with this mandate to spend less, invest more, to build the strongest economy in the G7. And
Mr. Chair, point of order. Can you direct the witness to answer the question?
She's asked a pretty straightforward question,
giving it-
President. We appreciate a straightforward answer,
Chair,
please.
Should I be allowed to respond?
With an answer, yes, please.
That's answer. It has a background, and then I come to answer. So you want me to give you answer as you need it, or should I be giving the factual answer?
We'll give you a bit more time if you want to add context to it, but please get to the answer.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure, I can do that.
Yep.
Your spring economic update, the real GDP forecasts from the Bank of Canada are lower than your government predicts for 2027. Why is that? What are your assumptions based on? And what will happen if the projections are wrong?
Bill, can you please respond to this question?
Certainly. So this is really the purview of the Minister of Finance to endorse projections, but what the government does do in the budget and its updates is to present the assumptions made by others, including the Bank of Canada. These are forecasts, so there's absolutely room for different numbers. And the government typically in their budget does include some other scenarios just to show you the effect of, better economic performance than anticipated or worse. So you can see the impact on the deficit, but this is really the purview of the Minister of Finance.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that, Mr. Matthews. How much time do I have? I'm probably done.
About 20 seconds.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Osborne, please, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question, Mr. President, but it's probably in jest. If these books are political, can you tell me why they're blue? The budget and the estimates. In any event, I'll get to my real question. Mr. President, I think in these geopolitical times, it's not just nice to have, but it's essential to have the strategic investments such as national defence investments, the Build Canada Homes investments, the major projects. But we also have a goal as a government to balance the books. Can you talk about areas where we have seen progress in terms of the comprehensive expenditure review and what the plans are over the next couple of years so that we can see the reductions that taxpayers are looking for?
Merci beaucoup. It's a really important question. As we all know, we're facing the global instability. We are facing affordability issue. We are seeing crisis in gas and other sector. We are in a tariff war. We have to focus on the priorities that matter most to Canadians, which is to moving from reliance to resilience, to build the strongest economy in the G7, to secure our borders, to invest in energy, to invest in infrastructure, to invest in Canadian armed forces. And that's exactly what we're laser focused on. So we're a comprehensive expenditure review. It was a mandate was given by Canadians to balance our operational budget in 3 years, to find savings to invest on the areas where it needed the most. And that's exactly what we are focused on. And that's where you see that 48 billion for defense support, which is like to provide them modern equipment, training to men and women in the uniform who are securing our borders, so who can protect our sovereignty and build Canada strong. We are investing in infrastructures, so finding those underperforming initiatives and investing into build Canada homes, to build affordable homes. So that is the focus of this government, and that is the focus of this exercise, which means more high-paying jobs in other sectors. For example, we're hiring 1,000 RCMP officers, hiring 1,000 CBSA officers. In defense, the recruitment was like at 30 years high. So that is the investments we are making and focused on, and at the same time, we're trying to bring our public service in sustainable level to balance our operational budget in the next 3 years.
Thank you. The hiring of consultants, we've seen a 10% reduction last year. We are focused on achieving a 20% reduction over the next 2 to 3 years. Can you tell me what policies, what efforts are in place to ensure, as we reduce these consultants, that we have in-house expertise? And a step further, are there plans to build on that expertise, and what are those plans?
Sorry?
30 seconds, please.
Okay, this is a really important question. The consultants, there are some services are critical that we rely on consultants or contracts. For example, renovation of center block, or shipbuilding, or providing health services in indigenous communities. So we have to rely on those contracts and consultants. But management consultants, that have come down. That is about 46% last year. It has decreased.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Thank you for being with us again today. Mr. Matthews, I think you're back with your team on Thursday. We'll look forward to seeing you then. We will dismiss you, and thank you for being with us.
Are
colleagues,
we done,
before we leave.
Oh, merci beaucoup.
Yep.
Thank you.
Colleagues, quickly before we leave, Thursday at noon is our cutoff for the witnesses for the Build or the Buy Canada, please. When we're back from our break, we will be doing a couple days of the CER, our report. We will do Build Canada or the Buy Canada, and then we'll also squeeze in the PBO on the mains before we actually have to report back the mains, and then we'll have our vote on the mains as well. So please, Thursday by noon for the Buy Canada, if we can get them into the clerk. Again, thank you for being with us. If there's nothing else, we will adjourn.